Hello and welcome to the Hornet Talk Podcast interview with Keiran Maguire. I am joined by Keiran Maguire and also the regular co-hosting team made up of Ted and George. Good evening, Keiran. How are you?
I'm keeping busy. The world of football finance never sleeps, and therefore neither do I.
Well, that's very interesting. I know there's a lot of things going on at the moment with lots of other clubs. I think let's just get straight into the interview then. So what we'll do is we will go through a question at a time, and that will be how it runs. So here we go. So our first question to you, Keiran. So far, from what you've seen from Watford's accounts, what would you say is the biggest financial fault from us?
I wouldn't say that there are financial faults. Since relegation, the club has done well to get the wage bill substantially down. Certainly for staff. Scott Duxbury is still on 900 odd grand a year, so his pay doesn't seem to have gone down, but other staff have. So that's been reasonably successful. The player sale model, I think the identification of talent at Watford is very good. The club is making profits, although it's reliant upon player sales in terms of turning losses into profits. I think the areas that are concerning is that there will be a substantial change in the 2025 accounts because the broadcast deal from the Premier League and the parachute payments that Watford have received in 22, 23 and 23, 24, both of those will drop out. So that will have a substantial impact upon the club. But other than that, it's actually run pretty well in a division which can only be described from a financial perspective as a complete basket case.
So very interesting to know that the club's actually being run fairly well on a financial level. And it's good to know that there is good areas, but obviously everyone knows that there is some cause for concern in certain areas, which was wildly expected. So what would you say, and how is Watford's debt now compared to what it was a year ago, and when is your prediction as to when it's paid off?
Well, according to the accounts, Watford owe £73 million in the form of debt. They also owe £24 million in unpaid transfer fees based on my calculations, but they are due to receive some money as well from player sales. So in terms of that debt, a lot will depend upon, I think banks as a rule aren't keen on lending money to football clubs, because why would you lend money to a loss-making business? Why would you lend money to a business where you might have 20-30% of your customers are supporters of that football club, and if you're the bank which turns off the taps as far as finance is concerned, they'll get the hump and take their business elsewhere. So like many other clubs, Watford are reliant upon owner funding, and then it comes down to the attitude of the owner. Some owners just love their football club and are more interested in progressing the football club, trying to make it a success on the pitch. And if that costs them a few quid, and by a few, I'm talking millions, tens of millions, and then potentially hundreds of millions, if they've got that money, they don't particularly care. I think it's when owners' personal circumstances change. If we take a look at Chelsea, for example, they were being bankrolled by Roman Abramovich. He effectively put £900,000 a week into Chelsea for 19 years to make them a successful football club, but his personal circumstances changed because he was tied to a murdering lunatic in the shape of Vladimir Putin, and the UK government took a dislike to him. So that can cause problems. Or the owner decides that actually I'm not enjoying this, and again they turn off the taps. And we saw that at Derby County. They had an owner in Mel Morris. He put in the thick end of £200 million into the club, got bored, decided he'd had enough, and put the club into administration because the club couldn't pay its debts. He'd run up a massive tax bill as well during that period. So I think the focus on the debt isn't necessarily a valid one. You've got to focus on the owner and their approach to the debt. If the Pozzo family have lent money to Watford and they're quite happy for that money to be kept outstanding and they're not charging huge amounts of interest on it and so on, then I personally don't see that as being a problem.
Well, that's interesting to know, because we know that there's quite a bit of debt that has been racked up. How long down the line do you reckon it will be for it to be fully paid off?
I can't see it being in a position to be paid off whilst Watford are in the Championship, because they're no longer in receipt of parachute payments. So unless you are able to pull off a couple of fantastic player sales which generate 30 or 40 million, then in my view, the club is likely to be losing money on a week-by-week basis. I'm just calling up the Watford accounts here on my iPad to get a few more details. But I don't anticipate that those loans being in a position to be repaid. Now, it could be that the club is sold, and when the club is sold, then the club can repay the debts, or the new owners can come to an arrangement with the existing owners as far as the debt is concerned. So my personal view is I would be fairly relaxed about the debt compared to many owners in the EFL Championship. The owner loans are modest. There's a bank overdraft of 600 grand. And I say, well, it's only 600 grand. Yeah, it's still a lot of money. You've got the Pozzos being owed over 50 million, and it looks as if they're charging interest on that. And then you've got some third-party loans as well. So, it's 20 grand's worth of third-party loans. Sorry, 20 million pounds worth of third-party loans that are cause for concern. But those have gone down from 63 million to 20 million as a result of player sales and parachute payments. So I think that's actually quite a sensible approach to take by the club. And I've not come here to praise the club, or to condemn them. But I think they're doing the right thing here.
Yeah. So we're. On the debt front, we're very much paying off many loans, and as you said there, that's all the owners' loans that we're kind of relying on, and that kind of leads into my next question about debts and dependency on certain things. How dependent were we on the parachute payments, and how long is it going to be that we can still be a sustainable football club without the parachute payments? Because obviously they ran out last season.
Well, the parachute payments meant that Watford Football Club generated £45 million of broadcast income in 2024. That's likely to drop in 2025 from 45 million to might be 10 and a half. So that is a substantial decrease. The wage bill is 33 million. If you add up the income streams, you're probably looking at an income of around about 22. The wage bill last year was 33. So what Watford have to do is they have to do one of two things. Either the owners say, we're going to subsidise those wages and have a competitive budget in terms of player recruitment, or the alternative is slash and burn. You'll have players out of contract at the end of 2025. They don't get renewed. Players might be offered deals on far less money, and sell the highest paid players, ideally elsewhere, make a profit on it, and try to realign the club. But looking at my figures here, which are rough, and I always say that, Watford were paying around about 15 grand a week in wages in 23-24. By championship standards, that is top half, but it's certainly not top 2 or 3. But you also have to recall that Watford were in receipt of parachute payments in 23-24. So I'd expect those figures to drop. If we go back to 2014, 2015, the sort of the year before and the year in which Watford were promoted, in 2014, they were paying, the average wage was 5.5 grand a week. Now, I appreciate there's been a lot of wage inflation since then, but it does show that promotion has been beneficial for players, beneficial for players' agents, beneficial for Watford, of course, and you as fans. You've been in the Premier League, and deservedly so. But it has had a sizable impact upon wage inflation, and how that's going to be addressed going forwards in 25-26. Although it has to be said, Watford made £5-6 million today, by the looks of it, because Xiao Pedro's gone to Chelsea. It will be sort of things like that which can make such a difference. I suspect Watford will have made as much money from the Xiao Pedro sale to Brighton as they will from ticket sales this season.
Well, that's a massive kind of wage increase, and of course you expect that with kind of the inflation of wage and things like that. So that's a really, really interesting point. I am going to hand over to Ted, so he can ask you a few questions. So Ted, over to you.
So my first question is, are we in the right financial stability to push for a top 10 or even a playoff spot this season?
That comes down to the owners. If on a sustainable basis, on using the club's own resources basis, I would say no. But then I would probably say no to the vast majority of clubs. I do think that this season is an opportunity season for clubs in the Championship, because I think there's only 4 clubs in receipt of parachute payments. There was some club that had loads of parachute payments last season and managed to get relegated to League One. No idea who they are, but not clearly a bit of a clown show, one would say. So that's taken one set of parachute payments out, and therefore getting into the playoffs. If I was a club owner, I would probably be saying to myself, I think this is a really good opportunity to get into the playoffs, because there's only, I appreciate, Leicester, Ipswich and Southampton have come down. Sheffield United didn't make it. Actually, so they are the 4 clubs in receipt of parachute payments. But other than that, everyone's got a fairly even opportunity. Although I think there'll be a lot of fascination with at least 2 of the clubs who have been promoted from League One, in the shape of Wrexham, because they're an unknown, but unknowns can be both good and bad, and Birmingham, because they appear to have a lot of impetus behind them. And they've certainly got owners who are willing to invest up to the maximum limit possible in order to try to progress that club further up the table.
My next question would be, say if we did get promoted, end up getting promoted, the owners put a lot of money into the club and we did get promoted, would be in the, from the promotion money, say if we won the playoffs, we got that 100 million, would it be the right financial stability to stay in the Prem at least for 2 seasons?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question, Ted, because what we saw with, if we take a look at the clubs that were relegated in 23-24, because I've got their accounts, both Luton Town and Sheffield United effectively budgeted to get relegated and to bank the money that they made from the Premier League and only stay 1 season. But if you stay in the Premier League for 2 seasons, you can't get away with paying wages, 25, 27 grand a week, because the players have proven themselves to be of Premier League standard. And therefore, you tend to see a big increase in the wage bill in season number 2, but you don't get a big increase in the money coming into the club because it's the same TV deal. You're selling the same number of tickets. You probably signed a 2-year sponsorship deal, and it's likely to be with a generic gambling company or travel company, and the money involved at the bottom end of the Premier League isn't great from those deals. So trying to get the balance, my view is that I think it's better to be in for the second season, because it gives you an additional year of parachute payments should you be relegated, but also it gives you a second opportunity to survive in the Premier League and turn 2 into 3 and 3 into 4. And we've seen with the likes of Brentford and Brighton and Palace that those 3s and 4s can now become, Palace have been there for 13 years. Brighton are about to have their 9th season in the Premier League and so on. So if those clubs can do it, and they've not got resources which are significantly greater than those of Watford, why can't Watford?
So my next question is, if we got predicted from the supercomputer to go down this season. If we did, would we be able to keep up with these player wages, and would be able to keep a club afloat, or maybe go into liquidation?
Well, the club won't go into liquidation. Liquidation is where the club is effectively closed down and ceases to trade. If you're not in receipt of parachute payments, and the club isn't, if it was relegated in 25-26, then what you would see would be another significant reduction of broadcast money. So that would drop from £45 million in 2024 to probably £2 million in League One. So that's a sizable reduction to have to acclimatise to. Again, players will be out of contract. The players who be recruited to the club will be on League One level of wages. So you've got to focus on the balancing act that is involved with any business and any budget. If you've got less money coming in, can you cut your cloth accordingly? And can you plan and have a strategy in terms of your wage bill to be able to cope with the reduction in your revenues?
That was my last question, so I'm going to pass on to George now.
Hey Kieran, hope you're all right. So I've got a question about the Xiao Pedro transfer to Chelsea. If Watford get any revenue from it, do you think that will be invested back into the squad, or will it just be kept to get debts down?
Well, I can't answer that question, because you got to ask Scott Duxbury and the board of directors and the Pozzos. What are their plans? In my view, it's bonus money. They won't have budgeted for that particular transaction this summer, so it's a bit like winning a lottery, and it's going to be £5 to £6 million, not necessarily all at once, because if Chelsea only pay half the fee to Brighton, then Brighton are only going to go and pay half the sell-on to Watford, and that's the way that instalments work. So that's the position. I'm not equipped to answer internal questions, because ultimately that will be the board of directors and the owner being on a Zoom call together and deciding we'll use that money to reduce what the owners have to put in this season, and just treat it as a bonus. Or the alternative is to say the Championship, I'm not saying it looks weak this season, but it does look there's no red hot favourites in it, and therefore could you increase the playing budget by some rather than all of this windfall money?
Yeah, thank you. And I've got one more question. What, like in a 1 through 10, like in your opinion, what would you value Watford Football Club at in financial terms?
In terms of if I was selling the club, I mean, looking at some of the deals that have gone through recently, we have seen an uptick in the value of Championship clubs. At the same time, I was looking at Sheffield Wednesday recently, and I sort of valued it at 40, 45 million. Would Watford probably be slightly higher than that? I think anybody, Sheffield Wednesday have got a bigger, this isn't a criticism or a praise of anybody, but they've got a bigger fan base, they've got a big stadium, but Watford have got closer to London, closer to Heathrow Airport, which would be attractive to an international investor. Vicarage Road is in better set of maintenance, or better position in terms of maintenance, because Hillsborough's been left to go fallow to a certain extent by their owner. So 50 million, could you get that to 60 perhaps if you did a really good sale job? But Reading isn't too far away. Reading was sold, I think, for 24. Admittedly, they were in League One, but they have a fairly new stadium. So trying to work out a definitive value on what ultimately is a trophy asset, as we normally say in the world of finance, because it's not intrinsically a profit-making company or a cash-generating company, is always very difficult. But I do think that there would, if I was on the sales side of the deal, there would be a lot of positives that I think you could promote in the London proximity is really good. Access from international markets. If you're an owner that was overseas and wants to come across and see Watford on a regular basis, again, that works quite well. And all of these things help the sale price.
Yeah, thank you. That's all of my questions, so I'll pass it back to Keiran. Keiran, have we lost you again?
Nope, you shouldn't have. Right. Yeah, thank you to George and Ted for posing those questions, and thank you, Keiran, for giving us some brilliant answers. Back into kind of my questions then. Scott Duxbury has previously mentioned that a new TV deal will help boost revenue of the club. How much of an increase is that financial boost upon the previous?
If we take a look at a club which was not in receipt of parachute payments, they were probably earning somewhere in the region of £9 to £9.5 million a year from what we call solidarity payments from the Premier League and the EFL's own TV deal. I'd expect that to increase perhaps by 20%. So you could be going from 9.5 to 11.5 to 12 million. But there will be more matches available to viewers. So whilst that will be a positive, the negative is if I'm a subscriber to Sky and let's say that Watford aren't having a good season and it's February, it's a Tuesday night, and you've got the choice of either, and you're not a season ticket, but you're still a Watford fan. You've got the choice of either going to the match, and I have to apologise, I don't know how much you're selling your match day tickets for, and you've got Swansea, and you're 11th and Swansea are 15th. Are you going to go and pay 30 quid for a match day ticket when you can watch it for nothing on telly? So yes, I agree with Scott Duxbury that there will be an increase in broadcast income, but that could be at the price of attendances might take a bit of a dip. unless the club's doing successful. And people always come to watch a successful team. So it will be dependent upon what you're seeing on the pitch as well.
Yeah, I think we as a club, unfortunately, never really sell out, and I think that the new TV deal will kind of exacerbate that. But if it's giving the club increased revenue, then it's fine by us. Moving on then, do you think the possible sale of Udinese by the Pozzo family will have a direct impact on our finances in the long term?
I don't think so. I think that money will be ring-fenced and it could be that they decide to sell Watford instead of Udinese. It is very much an unclear activity. I think we're still seeing transfer activity between Udinese and Watford, and clearly, you are the experts here in terms of being able to quote chapter and verse in terms of A, the names of the players, and B, the number of players that have been transferred between those two parties. The multi-club ownership model is one that is unproven in terms of being successful as a system for running the business. So we have to be a little bit cautious. And if they are selling Udinese, do they have plans to spend that money on either another football club or another investment project? Again, that it comes down to the desires of the individuals. Would I expect, if an Udinese sale took place, all of a sudden an extra £10 million to appear in the Watford playing budget? Probably unlikely.
And that's very, very interesting to know, and it'll be interesting to see how if the sale of Udinese goes ahead, what actually happens with the club. But that is a very kind of valid point there. Moving on to my next question then. Back in April, your podcast listed Watford in its running order, and then it was missing from the next day's podcast on the price of football. The same day, there were reports of players being paid late, which was explained by the club as a simple backs error. Do you know if what the club said was true, and why did you necessarily drop the story?
Well, if I answer that second question first, we were threatened by Watford legally that if they were not happy, that if you took a look at the running order of the show, I think it was Sheffield Wednesday, then Watford, then Reading. Now, I think it is fairly well known that Sheffield Wednesday and Reading have been subject to financial distress. And I think the feeling that was taken by Watford was that we were going to be effectively aligning on them and saying that they were a crisis club as far as that was concerned. And yeah, I received communication from Watford after I'd recorded the show, and there was various batting to and from Watford. We're quite fortunate at the price of football that we're listened to by a lot of lawyers, and we did take legal advice very, very kindly on a pro bono bonus. Yeah, but ultimately, I'm just a teacher. Yeah, I'm a complete nobody. I'm just a teacher. So I was disappointed by the approach taken by Watford, but at the same time, I've got a mortgage to pay, as to the other two lads. So we with deep regret, we cut the story from the price of football, and all we said that we have heard, and I think the club got it completely wrong as to where they did hear it from, and like this is not an exclusive or anything. I'll be perfectly honest. I know quite a lot of player agents, and one of the players' agents phoned me up and said, "My lad's not been paid. Where does he stand?" And I said, you're not winding me up here. I checked with some other people I know within the industry, again, not using people at Watford, because I know people at quite a few football clubs. I don't want to put anybody into an awkward situation. So some had been paid, some hadn't been paid. Then this story came out about it being a backs error, and that just seemed a bit strange, but it could be. I'm an old bloke. I've been employed for 40 plus years in various jobs. My salary's never been late due to a backs error. But sometimes these happen, and I believe there's been a problem with Watford women's team due to another banking error. So that's twice in 3 months. That's just unfortunate. Perhaps lightning can strike twice if there are banking issues. Sheffield Wednesday, they've been late with wages 3 times in 4 months, and you've now got a situation where players are giving notice to the club. We were never going to say anything like that in respect of Watford, but it happened towards the end of the season where there's not a lot of money coming into the club. It's up to other people to conclude as to whether this was a major financial issue. I'm also fully aware that when you have overseas-based owners, quite a lot of the time, the club doesn't have necessarily as much money as it would like in the bank account to pay a wage bill or HMRC bill, and therefore the chief executive or the finance director, they're on the phone, they're WhatsApping the owner, who might be in a different time zone, who might be on vacation. There can be many legitimate reasons. We were disappointed that Watford took such an aggressive approach with us. I'm not an aggressive individual myself. I'm just a teacher. But if that's the way they want to go, then so be it. We cut some clubs a bit of slack on some of the stories that we hear. Would I be willing to do that to Watford again? I don't know. I'd have to discuss that with the fellow guys at the podcast.
Well, I think you've answered so many, questions, and we really do thank you for that. You don't come across as an aggressive man, so I don't know why the club may have come at you in such an aggressive way, but obviously that's a legal issue. Well, that was a legal issue, and we obviously won't go into that further. But thank you so much for joining us this evening, Keiran. It's been a pleasure speaking to you today, all about the finances of the club and how we are.
Well, thank you very much.
Well equipped.
Oh yeah. No, I wish you have a great summer, guys, and up the Hornets for next season. I think it is a season of opportunity for Watford. If I'm honest, if you recruit well, there's no reason why you can't be getting into those playoff spots. But that's a football comment rather than a football finance comment. And as I always say to people, I'm a very, very fortunate person in that I teach professional footballers. I teach professional football managers. And again, I get many stories from them, which sadly 90% of them I don't feel are appropriate for broadcast, not because they're rude, but just because I need to be able to stand them up elsewhere. It's a fascinating industry to be connected to.
Yeah, it is, and it's interesting to speak to you today and really fully understand what is going on at Watford Football Club on a financial basis. So as I said before, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you to Ted and George. As always, I hope that answered many of your questions, and hopefully you got some of the answers that you wanted to hear. That's it from us at the Hornet Talk Podcast. We hope you have an amazing rest of your week whenever you're hearing this. We will speak to you soon. We are back for 25-26 soon, and we will let you know when that is very, very soon. So once again, thank you so much to Keiran for joining us today. And if you want to check out His podcast is the Price of Football podcast on Twitter. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's a fantastic podcast ran by Keiran and some of the other lads about all things football finance. So go and check him out. And we shall see you on the next one. Thank you, everyone, for today. And speak to you soon. Thank you and good night.